is where the sandbox exists. It's going to have a store of its own as well. Now, this does mean that in the future, and again, we're not doing this right now either, but I think in the future we will also have a Vorpal store that will happen. And I think the reason why we'll have a Vorpal store is we'll make it so that this can be a remote service as like a caching layer for the agent and the worker, basically, right? I don't know how I'm going to solve this yet, so I'm just kind of adding this as like a, put this like as a question mark, right? But this is something eventually in the future I want to figure out as well as too, because in the future, what I'd like to be able to do is I'd like to be able to say like, okay, well, obviously one of the stores will be file systems, but I think it would be very cool. I do not know what this song is. I mean, I know the original song, but I don't know who's covering it. But then say like, I really want to figure out S3. Like I really want to figure out like object storage and other things like that. Like I'd really like to figure out how an agent could pull artifacts from S3, right? And then have that directly on your machine. Like this is a step towards like caching, binary caching, like CI, all of that kind of stuff. But it's not something we're worrying about right now, as I said, right? Okay, hold on. Cool. So what else? So after the packaging service gets your source code from the agent, right? It unpacks it on its host and then runs that code in a sandbox, basically. That's the easiest way to put it. Now, this sandbox at the moment is something you can enable or disable. So this is another change that I made where by default, the sandbox should be completely separated from everything. You shouldn't get paths from your host system. You shouldn't get secrets from your host system, environment variables, like none of that. Like nothing should be passed to the sandbox, right? However, there are some things that need to not be sandboxed, and I'm going to get into that in a second with regards to showing you everything that I've built with Vorpal so far. But the TLDR is that the sandbox is now enableable or disableable by default. So if you want to run your build in the sandbox completely hermetically sealed, like no environment variables, no inherited binaries or anything like that, right? If you just wanted to do that, right, then you could disable the sandbox, or you could enable the sandbox and you get all those features. But if you disable the sandbox, it basically enables you to make it so that if you're in a scenario where it's like a chicken before the egg scenario, right, where like you want to build GCC, but you need something to build GCC with, right, which is really a problem I'm dealing with right now. But say that's something that you need to be able to achieve. Well, it might actually be easier for you to just disable that sandbox for now until you have that artifact, and then you can take that artifact and make it reproducible and build off of that, basically. So again, this is like that chicken before the egg, where it's like, okay, I want something that is reproducible, that builds the same way every time, but I can't build that thing until the thing that builds it is built, right? And this is very, very common with like, just programming in general, the whole chicken before the egg. So I made it so the sandbox is enableable or disableable. So you can either, again, run things in sandbox or turn it off and just run it, with the ability to inherit everything from the system. So again, we run everything in the sandbox. We get our output. Our output gets right now stored to the Vorpal workers, what's it called? Store, right? So there's a store that the packaging service talks to on the host of the server, and this is really where everything is stored currently. This is why I kind of want to make it so that eventually the store here is its own like service that can exist in the cloud, basically. Because then we could have the package service just go to the store, dump it there, and then the agent pull that from there. Because at the moment, the Vorpal agent actually pulls data from the worker. So after the packaging service finishes building your code, it will then put it in the store on its machine, right? However, it's not available to the config service or the agent yet on your development host. So we have to get that back somehow. So what we do is we basically from the agent ping the package or the store service technically. So I separated them.